In your wanderings, you stumble upon a ruined temple buried deep within the heart of the forest. Wary, you continue on through thick overgrowth until you see a clearing that was once an ancient cathedral built by people, now rebuilt by nature itself. In the center is a preserved altar, stacked with various dice of all shapes and colors. As you contemplate what this means, a cloaked figure approaches from the shadows.
Welcome, brave adventurer. Have you come to roll the dice? Explore strange new worlds with new strange rules? If you seek adventure worthy of being shared with good friends, you have come to the right place. Just roll for initiative.
Welcome to the Nat One Nerds podcast. Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome back to Nat One Nerds. This is Brandon.
And Parker.
And we are happy to bring you guys a brand new system. We just finished Fate Accelerated. I'm excited about this next one.
I am too. This is one that when I asked you what we should do next, you were like, boom, this TTRPG system. And I was like, I can see why. So...
So, for a longest time, I've been really wanting to check this one out just because it has some mechanics that D&D does not have. And this system is Call of Cthulhu. I personally have always loved horror stories, scary movies. I'm a spooky guy. Like, I'm not a spooky guy, but I like spooky stuff. I think it's fun. I like the thrill of a nice horror adventure. So, Call of Cthulhu is, if you're into that kind of stuff, it is right up your alley.
So you like the adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
See, those things do not describe me. So
you're a little more safe.
I'm a more cautious, safe personality, but I'm still excited to give this a try. I think it'll still be interesting. It'll still be enlightening. I'm actually really interested. I know one thing I've heard about is like their insanity checks or sanity checks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's sanity checks in this? Dang.
Yeah, you literally have to maintain your character's sanity. That's pretty cool. So, for those of you who have never heard of Call of Cthulhu, this is a system based off of the Lovecraftian mythos by H.P. Lovecraft. And it's based around... Your characters are typically some form of investigator trying to investigate paranormal horrors from the eldritch realm, hence Cthulhu. So it's much less sword and board magic fantasy and more kind of dark, more modern takes on how to investigate and exploring the unknown. And I'm sure you can play in any time frame you want, but it has kind of that darker early 1900s vibe.
Almost like a noir setting.
Yeah.
Like a horror noir setting.
Like if you mixed a black and white spy movie with a horror movie.
Got it.
So, if that's what you're into, then you'd like Call of Cthulhu. This game honestly has some wonderful features to it that honestly make a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. My favorite aspect of it was the dice system. When you use TTRPGs, most of them use the 7 standard dice, D4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 100, and D20. One that gets left out a lot is the D100. Like, when do you ever use that in D&D other than when you're rolling on a table as a DM?
I'm not going to lie, I usually use the percentile dice when I need 2D10.
Yeah,
I just use it as a weird D10.
Like, it's a relatively unused die, but Call of Cthulhu uses it for the majority of its rolls. It's almost like Call of Cthulhu's D20.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool because it's almost like your percent chance of failure. Like, for example, say one of the stats in Call of Cthulhu is strength, and you have a strength score of 55. That means that if you wanted to pass a strength check for something, you'd have to roll at least a 55 or under to have it within your strength parameter. And you can even get like better successes if you roll like half of that or like a fifth of that would be an extreme success. There's some really cool functions using that D100, which is fun for me because that's a die I never get to use, so I can break it out.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to use the dice that don't get used that often. Because D&D has like all the dice, but like I would say half the time, if not a little over half the time, essentially anytime you're outside of combat, you're using the D20.
Yeah.
For all your skill checks, all your saving throws,
pretty much everything. Yeah. So now that we have the dice talked about, We use the other ones. Oddly enough, Call of Cthulhu uses a D3 roll for some of its damage, which I've never seen a D3 in person, so I'll have to check that out.
Well, we did look up what a D3 would look like, and the first picture was like this weird, like, mishy looking.
It was like a blob thing.
There's a blob looking thing, so I would say that if a D3 is really called for, it's probably best to just either use a D4 and have the 4 be a reroll, or or just use like a digital version of a D3.
Yeah, I'm sure
like
there
a
are
random
ways.
generator.
And I'm sure there are people who have made cool D3s.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to characters in Call of Cthulhu, like we said, you typically play an investigator who's investigating some sort of mystery, some sort of something's going wrong, people are going insane, falling under the influence of eldritch gods, there are cults forming, there's so many different things you can do. But you build a investigator as your character, and instead of classes like you normally have in D&D, they have what are called your occupations. And that's kind of like what your character's job is.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that probably in the next episode for character creation. Just as a general idea, the impression I got from this was that it's just, again, to kind of compare it to what I know best, D&D. It's like pretty much every character has the investigator background. Like you have some kind of tie-in to where your character would be called upon or asked to help in an investigation of some kind.
Exactly.
So you're going to have that kind of thing. So even though you don't always play to that, you're going to have that tie-in. It's kind of like essentially you have, just to have an equivalent, that's kind of the impression I got from it, was that you have the investigator background. But as I said, we'll probably talk more about that in the next episode here when we actually make a character.
Yeah. But they have some really fun occupations. Like, one that I got a good chuckle out of is a Bible salesman.
I'm doing that one.
But you can also be like, there's a police detector, professor, you could be like a author. You can be pretty much anything.
Ooh, an author? Ooh.
And what the occupations determine is basically your skill proficiencies. They help you to determine your stats a little bit. It helps with basically flushing out what your characters feel would be, what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Would you say it's kind of roughly equivalent to a class in D&D, just to give people like kind of some kind of comparison gauge to it?
Kind of. It doesn't have class progression as much as D&D does, as more of just setting up what your character's like.
Got it.
So once you make a character, you go through and determine their characteristics, which are Call of Cthulhu stats. And some of them you might recognize, some of them might seem a little foreign. You have strength, constitution, size, dexterity, appeal, education, intelligence, and power. These carry over a little bit. Strength is your normal strength for pretty much any system. It's your raw physical power that you can bring to the table. It's how strong you are.
Yeah.
It's self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Constitution is the health and hardiness of your investigator, kind of just how tough you are, how hard of a hit you can take. Again, pretty explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Size is an interesting one that I found that they threw in there. Apparently it's important in here. But that's kind of just the overall value of your height and weight combined into your size. And that kind of factors into your constitution a little bit. They figure a bigger person can take a bigger hit. Dexterity is normal, just your agility, your speed, how fast you are. It's your normal dexterity.
Yeah.
Appeal is an interesting one. It's kind of like charisma, but just like what people stereotype charisma to be. It's your physical appeal, like how good looking your investigator is. And this can help a lot in situations.
So it's mostly physical appeal.
Yeah, no, it's how good looking you are.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So you have a stat for how attractive your character is. It's interesting. I'll have to see how that can be used. The next one is education. That's pretty self-explanatory itself, too, even though it is a foreign stat. It's a measure of the knowledge that your investigators accumulated through formal education, or, as they put it, street smarts as well. Oh. So it's your total of how much experience your character has.
Got it.
And as an investigator, education, I'd assume, is a pretty important stat. The next one is intelligence, which I find interesting that that's separate from education. And that's like your innate cunning, problem-solving abilities, and how your like logical reasoning.
Okay.
So, kind of like the innate intelligence.
So I feel like education is more of like, you take that general intelligence, like, because some people are just for whatever reason, are just simply better problem solvers than other people, almost regardless of education. They're able to kind of see the connections and the puzzles a little bit better.
Yeah.
Then, like, some people are just better at... Some people can do a Rubik's Cube and some people can't. I can't do a Rubik's Cube because my intelligence is apparently not that super high according to Call of Cthulhu. So
it just means you got to learn the algorithms.
Yeah. So I feel like education is like that more formal stuff.
Education is your wizard power. Intelligence is your sorcerer power.
Got it. Speaking my language. No.
They're both basically the same, but acquired in different ways. And then the final stat of power is an interesting one. It's the combination of your force of will, spirit, and mental stability. Basically, like how strong a fortitude your mind is, which I find to be really interesting. With that, your character will determine their in-game stats that are used, such as hit points, their magic points, because there is a little bit of spell casting, but not a ton.
There's like eldritch horrors going around. Like there's
a little bit of magic.
There's some occult magic going on here.
Oh yeah, but
powers.
The best one is your sanity stat. Sanity, because you're dealing with these crazy, horrific nightmares, you have to worry about your character remaining sane, which I think is a really cool concept that I wouldn't mind other systems implementing. Your sanity stat is kind of determined based on a little bit of your intelligence and your power. How that works is your insanity is how there and grounded your investigator is. As you go through the game and explore, you're going to run into things that are pretty dang traumatizing, and they'll mess you up. And when that happens, you have to roll the sanity checks to help you know how well you handled the situation. One thing I found interesting about Call of Cthulhu is it's much more gritty and realistic than Dungeons & Dragons. How they do it is you have a relatively low hit point total, like usually in the teens or 20s around there. And when you take damage, you only regain 1 hit point passively per day. There's no really healing. You don't get a long rest, and then all of a sudden that arm that got lopped off is fine. It's a little more realistic. And you can go see a doctor. There are medicine checks and things that you can do to help that along. But generally, you do not want to get hurt in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, from what you've been describing and explaining about this system, this is a system where in D&D, it encourages you to get into combat. This system is the exact opposite, where there's combat options, unique combat prowess, but the game itself and the system encourages you to avoid confrontation with these horrors as much as possible.
I mean, if you think about it, you're not some powerful barbarian bolstered by the spirits of your ancestors that can tank an actual tank and just laugh it off. You're just an average human investigator facing eldritch horrors of the abyss. Like, you're gonna get torn apart if you go and try to fist fight them.
So imagine yourself with a pistol facing supernatural occult powers.
Yeah, it's not gonna go too well for you.
Yeah.
But on top of the health system being a little harsh, they're also pretty harsh with the sanity mechanic. So your sanity can go up and down, but as a general rule of thumb, there are very few things that increase your sanity, but there are a lot of things that decrease your sanity. Basically, like I said, whenever you run into anything that's horrific, such as your friend's mutilated corpse as an example they throw out, like, it gets gritty. You have to make a sanity check and determine if and how much sanity you lose. And an interesting little twist they throw in is if you lose 5 or more sanity at once, then you go into a bout of temporary madness, which is kind of crazy. Crazy. So your sanity is generally going to decrease over time, which is why in the Quick Start Guide, they tell you to basically expect to lose a few characters while you're playing. This game is a lot harder, it's a lot more gritty, and you're not going to be able to just laugh stuff off like you do in D&D.
Yeah.
You can't take a dragon blast to the face, go down, and then someone shoves a Goodberry down your throat and you're perfectly fine.
Yeah. That's still kind of an extreme example. Goodberry, I think, does like 1d4.
It does 1 point of healing.
It does 1 point.
In D&D, as long as you have 1 point of health, you can do whatever you want.
Theoretically, yeah. Mechanically wise, yes, you can.
Which I find really interesting because, like, you can just sit there and pop back up. But no, not in Call of Cthulhu. Another interesting feature they had is if you take more than half of your total hit points in a single hit, then you get a major injury and you're basically out of the fight. The people who wrote this system really want you to go down.
Yeah, combat is an option in the system, but as we kind of have already implied and said, you generally 95% of the time want to avoid confrontation in combat as much as possible.
But if you do happen to get into combat, you can definitely still defend yourself. It's much less sword and board, bows and spells than D&D. Instead, it's a lot of firearms, knives, clubs, like things that you would have in your normal modern life. They go all the way up from unarmed attacks to knives. They have baseball bats. You can even have a shotgun if you want to. I think that's pretty cool.
That's super dope, honestly.
Just be a librarian walking around with a shotgun.
Just kick open the atrium doors and just be like...
just take them out. But overall, I've gotten pretty good vibes from our initial reading through of Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think from your experience so far?
I am excited to learn this system. I really am. Like, now, is this a system? Now, it's obviously early. These are first impressions from reading through. We have yet to do our actual play where we sit down and actually play the system. As I kind of said at the beginning, Brandon is definitely more of a horror suspense kind of guy. Like, I could hardly handle The Ring, and I loved A Quiet Place, but I have no desire to see that movie ever again, even though I liked it.
Oh, that one was good.
So when they came out with number 2, I was just like, nope. Because it was a great story. It was awesome. I enjoyed the movie, but is this something that I can sit down and rewatch, multiple times? Probably not. I mean, my wife made fun of me when we saw Jurassic Park in the theater as like a throwback Tuesday. I fell for every jump scare in Jurassic Park. Like flying out of my...
Oh, see, that's my favorite part about watching anything horror with my wife, is she gets scared so easily. Like, she's great, and I love her. But honestly, that's half of my entertainment of watching these movies, is watching her jump out of her seat and try to claw my arm off.
That's my wife. Mm-hmm. But I am excited. I know the sanity checks were really cool. Because honestly, the first time I ever even heard of sanity checks in TTRPGs was actually listening to the Dungeon Run, where the DM created this whole arc where he created his own homebrew rules for sanity checks as they went to this haunted island that was surrounded in this mist that caused people to go insane. And that's why people didn't visit the island and figure out the mystery of the island, right? And people had to make these saving throws, and I think it was based off wisdom. It was like wisdom saving throws. Mm-hmm. But it still incorporated like almost this like insanity homebrew mechanic based off D&D mechanics within the system. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, that is so cool. And you had like little things that you can drink to like help counter the sanity, like these potions that were made of really vile stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why people didn't venture in there, because if they are going to, they need this potion, but this potion is so freaking vile that every time you drink it, you first have to make a Constitution saving throw, and then if you succeed, then you can make the Wisdom saving throw with advantage. So, so it's just, yeah. And I thought that was really cool. So when you brought up, as we were exploring, naturally we heard about other systems as we've explored a couple others. And this is something that I'm really interested to see how they really incorporate it fully into the mechanics instead of some homebrew thing on top. Like it's embedded in the system. So I'm really excited to learn about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to see a system that's actually able to incorporate emotional damage.
Yeah.
I've said that in D&D and Fate and the other systems we've tried, it's fun to be able to experience your character's development, but there's not really any way to really embody how the adventure impacts them emotionally and intellectually. Mm-hmm. And I really like how this embodies that, because in other games you face eldritch horrors too, but you just walk away from it, take a long rest, and you're fine. Mm-hmm. This is not the case in Call of Cthulhu.
No.
So we are really excited to give this one a shot, and we are looking forward to building a character, getting to play around a little bit. Hopefully you guys can maintain your sanity listening to this section. But that's about it for our quick wrap-up of Call of Cthulhu. Mm-hmm. So we're excited to see you guys as we explore the rest of the system.
Yep, absolutely. if you can't tell, Brandon is the one that really wanted to do Call of Cthulhu
Oh, I'm so excited.
because you're going into psychology. And so naturally a system that embodies psychological elements into the mechanics. I was like, I should have seen this coming.
Oh, I would totally play a psychologist.
Is that an option for an occupation?
I'm sure there's a homebrewed one somewhere if it's not. I haven't looked through all of them.
I feel like that would make sense, though.
Oh, it totally would. There
Yeah.
would need to be so many psychologists in this world.
Yeah. So, but we'll see. We'll let you guys know next episode if we're able to find a psychologist occupation. If not, at least a homebrewed one. Because if it's a TTRPG system, there's a homebrew somewhere out there for it. You know,
Oh, yeah.
on top of what's in the rule book.
Oh, there is a psychologist. I just looked it up.
Oh, is it actually in the system?
Yeah, it's actually in the system.
Oh,
You have an
sweet.
occupation of psychologist.
Oh, heck yeah. Is there like out of curiosity, is there like a clergyman?
Yep, there's a couple different options for clergy.
Okay, because I know there's the Bible salesman, but I feel like that's just a devout member of a church instead of like actually being the clergy.
Yeah, there's one that's straight up clergyman.
Okay.
I mean, or you could just be a bus driver. That's cool too. It's one of the occupations.
Yeah. Well,
But we'll get to explore a lot of those more when we get to our character creation episode.
absolutely. So, well, let us know what you guys think, because we obviously we want you to be introduced to these systems through a podcast, but we definitely encourage you to check it out yourselves. The publisher for this system has a quick start guide to the system that goes over the very fundamentals of the system that you can find on their website, which we'll put in the podcast episode description notes for you guys to find.
Yeah, the Call of Cthulhu, by the way, is published by Chaosium. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But they're a pretty cool company. They put a lot of work into this. They've been working on it since 1981.
Yeah. And I believe they do have other systems too. But this is their bigger one.
Their bread and butter. Kind of like how Wizards of the Coast bread and butter is Dungeons & Dragons.
That's all.
Even though they publish other games.
Yeah. Well,
they do Magic the Gathering and stuff too.
So that's not a TTRPG though. So that just sucks all your money. But anyway, yeah, we're very excited to explore all these different things. We appreciate you guys for listening.
If you want to reach out to us, we're Nat One Nerds Podcast on both Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you guys there. We post fun memes. We like to engage with our community. So come stop by and say hi.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll also let you guys know that as far as you can reach us through email as well at natoneNerdsPodcast@gmail.com. All one word, no capitalizations. Let us know your thoughts if you have questions about any of the TTRPG systems we've explored, if you have suggestions for other systems, or you just kind of want to know a little bit more about me and Brandon and the podcast in general. But with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode.
Yeah, this is Nat One Nerds signing out, and hopefully we'll get to see you next time as we explore more of Call of Cthulhu. Happy rolling!